think it through because it's so unpleasant. And what then happens is the mind still tries to do it subconsciously, which is why you then suffer flashbacks, because it then comes back into your consciousness like video clips, which you then suppress, or nightmares.
Of course, look, things can replay in your mind all the time.
And the other symptom is avoidance. So you avoid stimuli likely to trigger recollection. So, for instance, women traumatized during childbirth will avoid any kind of sexual contact with their husband. Or Meghan, who's traumatized by the UK, avoids the UK. And the other thing is a state of hypervigilance. So you're on edge, you can't concentrate, you can't sleep, you're jumpy. And the key thing to know is that you can treat this very, very effectively.
Look, here's my take on it, and I've always made it very clear. I believe about choice. Everything for me is about choice. So, in terms of a child being sexually abused, they don't really actually have a choice. It's they don't have the other option other than report it and whatever. Now, okay, I don't think it was, or they're probably embarrassed about it. But they don't really have a choice when that actually happens to them because they are totally controlled. It's not within their control. Whether physically, because they're not physically haven't got the mental, the physical strength to be able to fight it off. When you look at people like Meghan Markle, now she's made a choice, and I'm happy for that. She's made a choice that actually this is not the life for me anymore, and with Harry. So she's decided to go in another direction. This is not working for me. This is too traumatic, too stressful. Poor dear with her £3 million Instagram advertising revenue. But she's made a choice to walk away and go and pursue another way. But don't complain about it if it's causing you mental health and stay, because the thing is, if something's causing you anxiety, and you brought up the thing about a boss. Now, actually, having a job is probably important, but it's still a choice for you to stay there and be abused by a bad boss. Now, admittedly, the balance, and I'm not saying all choices are great, but even if there's two bad choices, or one's going to be worse than the other, so you've got to make a decision which one you're going to actually take. Or do something about it.
Yes, but you can't. I mean, that's too black and white. The fact is, people are in a job because they need a job.
Go find another job.
And it's not that easy, because often you'll depend on your boss for a reference, let's say, and furthermore, especially with bullying, it can start slowly, because usually bullying is because your boss feels a little bit insecure anyway. So therefore you've got to get established, show that you're good, make them feel insecure, the bullying starts, you start questioning, was that bullying, am I at fault?
I've got to say, give a bully a good slap down, and it doesn't even have to be physical, although sometimes it actually works.
But you see, with authority you can't do that. That's the difficulty, because people are programmed to respond in respect to authority, and that's the key thing, what you don't understand, because humans are, we're group beings, we're programmed or hardwired for structure and hierarchy and leadership. We respond to authority figures. Therefore, by definition, we are out of control at some level in front of an authority figure, which is why the Milgram experiment showed, which is where a man in a white coat who was said to be a professor or a PhD instructed people who were members of an experiment to give electric shocks to someone in another room when they got the answers wrong. And people did it because of the authority figure. Very, very few people refused. They even, apparently, as far as they knew, applied fatal electric shocks. So authority figures, it's not as simple as leave your job, because people feel controlled by authority figures.
Well, it depends if you're actually coming from a place of scarcity, and if you are in that place of scarcity, you're not going to have the control. But the thing is, and this is where mental strength comes in, you've got to actually develop. There's a level of mental strength you can develop. Now, only about 10% of people have actually a very high level of mental strength, a natural mental strength, and grittiness and things like this. Yeah, the other one, they'll probably never achieve such a high level, but there's a lot of things you can do about it, because mental strength comes from control, It comes from your composure, so emotional intelligence in some ways. It comes from willing to take on certain challenges. Now, if you're not willing to take a risk and take on challenges, you're never going to you're going to stay exactly where you are. So sometimes you're going to have to take a level of risk, and I think that's a natural instinct of a human, or used to be, because every time they used to go out and hunt, there was a risk. When you actually went and fought, which they did very much in the old days, was a risk. Going across the sea in a we didn't exactly have the QE2 in a boat or a ship, was a risk, considering the amount of disease that people died from on those days. So all the things that people did in the olden days, there was a level of risk involved, and we've just become. And this is where I find.
But risk is good.
Yes, it is. Risk is good.
But
and the
hang
last
on.
thing is a level of confidence and self-belief, and that can be knocked out of you. But you can regain a level of that now, whether it's with support or whether it's with some cognitive behaviour therapy or whatever. But I'm sorry. Interrupted a second, and it's thrown me off course. I was in my flow there.
Mental toughness.
And so all these people who've actually taken these risks, it's part of our natural thing they need to be able to handle. And when we take that away from people, and this is where I struggle with this whole state-controlled socialism that is looking to be implemented. It's not about, I'm not against helping vulnerable people. We should help vulnerable people. But it's not about making people vulnerable. But the thing is, by making people vulnerable, as a state-controlled thing like Iran and things like this, that was, and I'll come to that in a second. When you have a dictatorship and you're running the state with a real iron fist, you've taken that control away from them, because then you can manipulate them, because they're coming from this place of scarcity. Now, I've got to say, democracy is also an illusion that is being sold to us, and we've gone down this road. But look what has happened in Iran. There is a point when you actually have a choice where you actually take the better choice out of the two. Now, people have gone out in Iran over this missile attack on the plane and argued against the government. All right? Now, that choice, in effect, is you can either lump it and suck it up, or you can either fight against it because you won't be able to tolerate a regime like that anymore, and risk actually dying, because that's what they'll do to you. You protest the government and the Ayatollah, who is the head of state, you do risk death. Now, if you've made that choice to do that, then which one's the worst one out of the two?
I think we're talking about slightly different. You can't compare everything in one umbrella under one umbrella.
Because they have made a choice. You do have a major choice whether you actually and actually going out. And I'm not a big one for protesting either, by the way. But when you actually go and fight against a regime that is actually totally against your principles and the values that you actually want to live by, and you've got no other way of actually fighting back, then that is your choice. And I think that's what it comes down to. So if you're suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, yes, it's easy. You can go down that downhill spiral and things like this. But actually, do something. You can also find ways of doing something about it.
Well, I mean, the thing is that the human condition.
Maybe it's just me.
As you know, the human condition is that 98% of what we do is emotional and reflex, with no logical thought, and therefore no choice making. And therefore humans are easily led for exactly that reason. And in fact, even in I was watching a very interesting TED talk by someone who I respected a lot more after he said this, but he said even elections, they're not about what people think, they're about what people feel. And he's absolutely right. It's again emotion. It's not based on logic, which is why democracy is nonsense. And therefore, when you talk about mental toughness, you see the key thing is awareness. And
what?
Awareness. You see that because we're all reflex anxiety reducers as cavemen, the more aroused or anxious we were, then the more likely we were to escape predators. But now, if you are more anxious, more aroused, you're hardwired to reflexly reduce that. by any means necessary, which usually means illusionary needs or escaping illusionary predators, because we haven't got any real needs or predators anymore.
But even if you see it as an illusionary predator, you do have the ability to do something about it.
Not really, because remember, it's emotional, it's reflex.
You still have free will.
No, we don't, because remember, 98% of our action is emotion. It's not free will, which is why we're suffering so much stress, because we're on a treadmill of instant gratification, out of control, which is why we're stressed.
We talked about that last week, but what I'm saying is, if your life is shit, excuse my language, you have a choice to make some changes in your life that will make it better. Now, I'm not saying it's going to be easy.
Very difficult. And
I'm not saying it's going to be easy.
Professional help, like with you or me helping, where first of all you say, the first thing is go counter to what most psychologists do. So, for instance, with anxiety, psychologists try and help you deal with your anxiety, which is an enormous mistake, because as soon as you think of your anxiety, you're hardwired to reflexly reduce it. And therefore, the first thing to do is mindfulness, accepting your anxiety, and just non-judgmentally say, I'm anxious. And as soon as you do that, the research shows that your amygdala activity drops, which is your fight-flight, and gives you a chance to think logically. The next thing you do is, remember what I said, you try and look at your longer vision and say, does this fit in with my vision? The next thing you do is you say, hang on a second, go back to primordial thinking. Is this a need or is it a want? And if it's a need, you better get on and do it, because you're dead if you don't. But 99.9% it won't be a need, in which case you ask yourself, well, what's the bigger picture? If what I'm doing now fits in with the bigger picture, I'll choose to do it. But that's a lot of hard work that I've now just discussed, and it's a lifetime of practice that people have to do. It's not easy, but it's worth it.
It doesn't happen overnight. I mean, we're all flawed in some way or another. But the thing is, if the action that you need to take is to go and get help, because there is help out there. Whether you go to the Citizen Advice Bureau, whether you go to your doctor, whatever it is, there is help. Now, hopefully the doctor won't just say, actually, you're depressed and just put you on bloody Prozac, which is what some people...
Or contact us through Twitter.
Yeah, yes, you can do. I mean, I'll just say that I'm not a psychologist. But, you know, Theo does actually have a background in that. So if you actually want to, by all means, and you should. But what I'm looking to, but I am very much, my in terms of, if you want to look at my brand personality as such, I'm not really the most fluffiest guy in the world. So I'm the most empathetic in that respect. I believe in a good hard kick up the arse sometimes. That's where I've seen the most results. However, my daughter would argue that that's not always the best appropriate way. But the thing is, I don't want to empower people. You know, when people say, actually, don't tell people that they're... I'll give you an example.
You're the rough army major.
Don't tell people that they're fat. Empower them to lose weight. And I'm thinking, what do you want me to do? Empower you to be fat. Empower you to accept that being fat is a standard that you should actually settle for.
No, what you see, the key thing is self-awareness. In other words, you're better than being a fat slob. That's what you need to tell someone who's fat. You're better than being a fat slob.
I believe in fat shaming, sorry.
You know, a pure fat shame may actually make them feel out of control. What you say is you expect them to be better. You're better than a fat slob.
But not everyone responds to that. We assume that everybody responds to that, but not everybody does respond to that.
No, because they could have other issues.
I mean, just to wrap up with Meghan Markle, she says she's suffering from mental health issues. Yeah, I've got to say, you made a decision, or you both made a decision to go. Great, okay. I wish you all the best. Hopefully, you'll still be involved with the royal family, because you can do a lot of good out there if that's what you really want to do, rather than actually be all about the money. But you know what? Also, get over it. There's plenty of other people out there suffering as well. What do you have to say?
Thank you, Andy. I think that's nicely put. Thanks for listening, everyone, and we will see you next week. Bye-bye.
Thank you.